I love being part of a happy family. The friendliness here at this church to me is overwhelming, and I'm so glad for it. A few years ago, I went backpacking in the Sierra Nevadas with my brother Hal. This is my brother Hal, the handsome guy in the background. That's my brother Hal. Now, when you go backpacking, you can't bring everything with you. You can only bring what you're willing to carry on your back. And that means you have to make some ruthless decisions about what really matters. By the time we finished trimming our gear, we had each squeezed our worldly possessions down to about 30 pounds of food and equipment for 3 days of rugged hiking. Now, we do this sort of thing because we love the challenge. We love the solitude. We love the simplicity. And honestly, the scenery is so breathtaking, it makes you forget all the stupid things that you pack that you don't need. Mostly we go because it's good to be together, just the two of us. Now, Hal does this kind of thing regularly. He's fit. He trains for it, but me, in the 3 years before our trip, my regular exercise routine consisted primarily of binge watching Netflix and grabbing more popcorn. I told him I was a little intimidated about the trip, and he brushed it off with a cheerful, "It'll be okay." Spoiler, it was not going to be okay. Our trek began around 8,000 feet. Now, for reference, Denver, the mile-high city, sits at about 5,280 feet, and plenty of people feel winded just walking up the stairs at that location. But we started out at 8,000 feet, and we headed straight up. On our first day, we climbed over a pass that topped out at about 10,500 feet, 2,500 feet of climbing that day. The air was thin enough to make you question all of your life choices. As I climbed, my breathing grew ragged. My heart pounded. My pace slowed to something between a crawl and a stagger. I would trudge forward 1 foot and then the next until my lungs were burning and my heart rate was so high I had to stop. I would stand there with my hands on my knees, waiting for my breathing to settle so I could attempt another 10 steps. Literally, 10. At one point, 10 steps was my entire world. Now, meanwhile, Hal just kept climbing, steady, strong, annoyingly happy about it. Before long, he was way ahead of me and out of sight. When I finally spotted him again, he was a tiny speck way up there on the trail. See him? He's right there. Yeah, I called him several choice names under my breath. I disowned him at least twice. And I thought, I am going to collapse on this mountain and my dear brother will not even notice. "I'll be okay," he said. This is what he calls okay? But when I finally crawled, more or less, up to the top of the pass, there he was, smiling, waiting. His pack was off. He'd opened it up and was ready with food and water, like some sort of annoyingly righteous mountain angel. And then there was the view. Oh my. From that ridge, we could see for miles, miles behind us where we'd struggled and climbed, and miles ahead toward valleys and lakes and meadows we hadn't reached yet. The world stretched out in every direction. The air was crisp, the horizon was wide, and for a moment, the struggle felt strangely worth it. The climb had nearly broken me. But the summit showed me something my gasping, irritated self could not see from below. A bigger world, a clearer perspective, a glimpse of where we had been and where we were going. When you're halfway up, nothing looks like a mountain. It just looks like rocks and roots and dirt, and a vague hope that the trail marker wasn't lying to you. But from the summit, everything makes sense. The path has shape, the struggle had purpose, and the journey had design. Most of us read the Sermon on the Mount like hikers with our nose an inch from the dirt. We see one command at a time, one teaching at a time, one challenge at a time. Don't be angry. Be reconciled. Love your enemies. Do not worry. Judge not. It can feel like a long spiritual checklist. Beautiful, yes, but overwhelming. But Jesus didn't preach a list. He preached a masterpiece. The sermon is not a bunch of scattered notes. It is structured. It rises. It peaks. It descends like a mountain. And today, my invitation is simple. Let's step back and see the whole mountain. Because when you see the sermon's shape, its message becomes even more powerful and far more hopeful. Jonathan Pentington argues that the sermon is arranged in 7 major sections, and scholars widely note that these sections form a chiastic mountain shape, rising and falling with literary symmetry. And at the center, at the summit, is the climax. In the case of the Sermon on the Mount, the climax is a prayer. A quick word about this idea of a chiasm. In much of Hebrew writing, especially in the Psalms, the prophets, and the teachings of Jesus, authors often arrange the ideas in a mirror-like pattern, where the themes on the way up reflect the themes on the way down. It's a literary mountain. The structure rises, it reaches a central peak, and then it descends in reverse order. The point of this design is to draw your attention to the center, the summit, because that's where the most important truth lives. Ancient Jewish listeners would have recognized this immediately. For them, the structure wasn't decoration, it was interpretation. The shape of the message revealed the heart of the message. Jesus' sermon is not simply preached from a mountain, it is a mountain. Its shape is its message. In it, the first steps of our climb, the Bible author sets the stage by placing Jesus on a mountain. Matthew tells us, seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him, and he opened his mouth, and he taught them. Now, we tend to glide past those words, but Matthew's early readers would not have missed what Jesus was doing. Going up the mountain to teach, sitting down like a rabbi, delivering divine instruction, this is Sinai language. This is covenant moment. This is God speaking from a mountain again. Because whenever God goes up a mountain in Scripture, something seismic happens. A mountain is where God reveals himself. A mountain is where God sets people free. A mountain is where God gives identity, law, and covenant. Moses ascends Sinai. Elijah ascends Carmel. Abraham ascends Moriah. And Isaiah sees the nation stream to the mountain of the Lord. In the Bible, mountains are where heaven and earth touch. They are where God's voice becomes clear. And now, here stands Jesus, God in the flesh, walking up a mountain again, not to receive revelation, but to give it. not to hear God speak, but to speak as God. Moses brought us tablets. Jesus brings us himself. The next step of our climb, the first major movement of the Sermon on the Mount, begins not with a rule, not with a warning, not even with an invitation, but with a blessing. Jesus opens his mouth on this new mountain and speaks over the crowd a series of startling declarations. Blessed, blessed, blessed. It is the sound of grace breaking open. Before Jesus ever instructs his followers on how to live, he names who they already are. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Identity first. Instruction second. As Jonathan Pennington emphasizes again and again, this is characteristic of the entire Gospel of Matthew. Jesus forms a people before he commands a people. He blesses before he directs. He names before he shapes. In a chiastic sense, this is the climber's very first upward step, the moment when you find your footing, you breathe the cold morning air, and you realize you are beginning something bigger than you expected. And yet, the wonder of this moment lies not simply in where we're headed, but in where Jesus chooses to begin. He doesn't begin with commands or demands or expectations. He begins with blessing. On this new Sinai, the king looks into the eyes of the weary and the overlooked and the spiritually bedraggled, and he says, blessed. Maybe. Pennington argues that Matthew wants us to feel this contrast. The first words of the new covenant people are not threat or thunder, but welcome. This is the soil in which obedience grows. Before Jesus invites anyone into kingdom ethics, he anchors them in kingdom grace. Dallas Willard used to say that Jesus never starts with what we ought to do. He starts with what God is already doing. And right here at the front door of the sermon, God is blessing the very ones that the world ignores. This is why structure matters. The sermon's opening movement is preaching the gospel. Grace comes before command. Identity comes before behavior, and belonging comes before transformation. If you flip the order, as so many of us Christians do, you miss the heart of everything that follows. The Beatitudes are not a poetic appetizer before the main course. They are the frame around the entire masterpiece, the overture that introduces every theme Jesus will unfold. They show us the kind of people God is forming, not spiritually accomplished, not the morally impressive, not the cultural high achievers, but ordinary people who know they need God. One theologian says that the Beatitudes reveal that the ones the world would never choose are precisely the one God delights in. Another calls them a portrait of the flourishing life under God's design. And as Bonhoeffer preached the Beatitudes in Germany's darkest hour, he insisted that these are not virtues that we climb toward. They are the lived conditions of people who have entrusted their lives to Christ. And this is the structural key. Everything in Matthew 5:7 grows out of the Beatitudes. Jesus teaches against anger because kingdom people are poor in spirit, not puffed up, not demanding, not self-important. He speaks about lust and honesty and integrity because kingdom people are pure in heart, undivided, whole, and free from duplicity. He calls his followers to reconciliation and enemy love, because kingdom people are peacemakers, those who refuse the world's tired cycle of retribution. He teaches prayer and dependence, because kingdom people hunger and thirst for righteousness. They long for God's will to be done in the earth as it is in heaven. The Beatitudes are the DNA of the sermon. They are the foundation upon which everything else stands. They are the beginning and the filter and the trailhead. If you misunderstand the Beatitudes, the entire sermon becomes an impossible mountain, too steep, too high, too crushing. But if you see them as Jesus' blessing the broken and forming a new kind of people, then the sermon becomes a breathtaking description of what grace can grow in human life. The book, Kingdom Ethics, puts it beautifully. The Beatitudes create a community shaped by mercy and justice and purity and peace. A people who embody God's heart in the world. And that community, the kingdom people Jesus is blessing into existence, is the point of everything that comes next in the mountain. This is where the climb becomes steep. Jesus lays out his relationship to the law, and then he offers 6 antitheses. You have heard, but I say. Pennington emphasizes this is not stricter legalism. It is a deeper calling into virtue, wholeness, and heart-level transformation. This section is soul-shaping ascent up the mountain's face. Here, the chiastic pattern begins to become visible. Section 3 moves upward into deep internal formation. Its mirror partner is Section 5, which will move downward into external wisdom practice. The left side of the mountain rises through the transformation of the heart. Section 4, then, Jesus transitions into practices, giving and prayer and fasting. Right at the center, like a stone lodge at the top of a mountain pass, stands the Lord's Prayer. This is the structural and spiritual summit of the entire sermon. Everything on its way up, identity and virtue, it converges here. Everything on the way down, wisdom and decision, flows out from here. Pennington's insight is that this section is not merely practical teaching. It is the hinge between who we are and how we live. To reach the summit is to discover not a demand, but a Father. Our Father in heaven. Daily bread, forgiveness, deliverance, and presence. This is the gravitational center of kingdom life and the exact midpoint of Matthew's structure. If section 3 was the sweat-soaked climb up the mountain, then section 5 is the careful, practiced descent. Here, Jesus gives a series of wisdom statements. Treasures in heaven, the healthy eye, trust instead of anxiety, judging with clarity, discernment, asking, seeking, knocking, and the golden rule. Pennington shows that this section mirrors section 3 like the right side of a chiasm reflects the left. Inner renovation becomes outer wisdom. A transformed heart becomes transformed habits. And internal allegiance becomes external discernment. The mountain's shape is now unmistakable. Ascent, summit, descent. And just as the summit shapes how you come down a real mountain, the Father-centered prayer shapes every practice in section 5. Jesus is teaching not only virtue, but vision, the way a flourishing person sees the world. Now, every climber knows the moment when the trail demands a choice. Hal and I once reached a literal fork, one path steep and rocky, the other gentle and easy. We checked the map. One trail leads off further into the wilderness. The other path leads us home. Jesus ends his sermon with the same invitation: 2 gates, 2 paths, 2 trees, 2 houses. Not good people versus bad people, but people who build on his words versus people who build on, well, anything else. Pennington stresses that the sermon is wisdom literature, and true wisdom always requires response. This is the final section of the chiasm, the right side equivalent of the opening setting in Beatitudes, where the picture of flourishing now becomes a call to action. Finally, Matthew records the crowd's response: astonishment. Jesus teaches as one who has authority, not as the scribes. This short epilogue mirrors the opening setting, forming the outer frame of the chiasm. Just as the sermon began with Jesus ascending the mountain, it ends with Jesus standing as the authoritative sage king of the kingdom of heaven. The frame is complete. A teacher greater than Moses, and a way of life greater than the law. The shape of the sermon is preaching its own sermon. Life with the Father is the center of everything. This is why willpower fails and anxiety burns us out. Because the sermon is not a self-help manual, but a Father-fed formation. You don't climb this mountain alone. Unlike my brother, the Father walks with you. And on the descent, he shows you how to live wisely in a world that desperately needs people formed at this mountain's height. Taken together, this structure teaches 5 things. Jesus forms, he doesn't merely inform. Prayer, relationship with the Father, is the sermon's oxygen. Identity comes before instruction. Formation requires a decision. And the sermon reveals what life under a king looks like now. Now. Not just sometime in the future. Just as the climb with Hal changed me, not because someone lectured us, but because the mountain shaped us. Jesus invites us up this mountain so that his presence, his kingdom, they reshape who we are becoming. The sermon is not only a mountain to admire, it is a path to walk, a life to inhabit, built around a Father who meets us at the center and guides us every step of the way. So, here's why all of this matters. If you only read the rules, love your enemies, don't lust, don't worry, turn the other cheek, the Sermon on the Mount feels impossible. It feels like looking up at a 14,000-foot peak with no oxygen tank. But if you read the structure, you hear Jesus saying something entirely different. You already belong. That's the Beatitudes. That's the blessed identity. Now, grow with me. That's the long, slow middle of life with God. The practices, the ethics, the transformation. And choose where you will build. That's the ending. The fork in the trail. The structure turns the sermon from a crushing burden into a liberating invitation. It puts grace in the lead and discipleship in its rightful place behind it. The sermon isn't a spiritual marathon that you run alone. It is a mountain Jesus climbs with you and for you. The structure teaches the gospel before the words ever do. So, picture yourself now standing there on that hillside with Jesus. You hear him begin, not with commands, but with blessing. You feel the warmth in his voice as he names the overlooked blessed. You watch him lift your eyes towards a kingdom that is coming and a Father who already knows you. And he leads you upward toward the heart of the sermon, the Lord's Prayer, the Father's embrace. He leads you then downward towards a transformed life, a life that bears fruit, and a life that's built on rock. And the whole journey leads to a simple question. Will you climb the mountain with him? Not flawlessly, not impressively, but willingly. Will you begin where he begins, with a blessing? Will you trust the Father at the summit? Will you walk the descending path of obedience with him by your side? When Hal and I reached the top of that mountain, gasping and sweaty, everything we grumbled about on the way up suddenly felt worth it. The view made sense of the journey. The struggle was part of the story, and standing there together, brothers, was the real reward. Jesus invites you to the same kind of view. Not a view of your spiritual performance, but a view of God's kindness. Not a checklist of commands, but a relationship with the Father. Not a mountain that you climb alone, but a life you live with a king who climbs with you. The mountain is before you, and the Father's at the summit. The king is beside you. Let's climb. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. While shepherds kept their watching over silent flocks by night, behold, throughout the heaven there shone a holy light. Go tell it on Father in heaven, we can't wait to go tell it on the mountain. And we know we won't be alone. That you climb the mountain with us, you form us into the new people that you've always intended us to be, and that you put us here in this world to enrich it, to make it better, and to make this a world that is your kingdom, given into you and letting you reign over us all the time. I can't wait. Come and make that happen soon. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, people. Can't wait to see you again next Sabbath or this afternoon at Grill of Faith.